The rain drummed against my security truck's windshield like angry fingers, each drop reminding me that I was sitting in a parking lot at 2 a.m, protecting some millionaire's empty construction site while my own life crumbled apart. Ryan Hale, decorated Iraq veteran turned glorified night watchman. If that wasn't the American dream, I didn't know what was. My phone buzzed. A text from Megan. Working late again, don't wait up. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Right, working late at the hospital on a Tuesday for the 4th time this week. I'd been married to Megan for 16 years, and I knew her tells better than a poker player knows cards. The way she'd started showering immediately when she got home, how she kept her phone face down during dinner. The sudden interest in girls' nights with Lisa and Barb, 2 women who'd never shown interest in anything more stimulating than reality TV and gossip. But the real kicker. Last week, I'd driven past the hospital during one of her supposed late shifts. Her car wasn't there. My radio crackled. Unit 7, this is dispatch. Everything quiet out there? Quiet as a tomb, Sarah, I replied, adjusting my position in the driver's seat. The construction site stretched before me, skeletal steel beams reaching toward the cloudy sky like the ribs of some massive beast. Just me and the ghosts of capitalism, Sarah laughed. She was used to my sarcasm by now. Copy that. Stay warm. I clicked off and stared at my phone again. No new messages. Sophie, my 15-year-old daughter, had texted earlier asking if I'd be home for breakfast. Smart kid. Too smart. She'd been watching Megan and me with those sharp eyes of hers, seeing things a teenager shouldn't have to see. The truth was, I'd suspected something was wrong for months. Megan had grown distant, cold. Our conversations had devolved into logistics about Sophie's schedule and household bills. When was the last time she'd laughed at one of my jokes? When had we last had dinner together without the television droning in the background? But suspecting and knowing were different animals entirely. My phone rang. Paul Martinez, my old army buddy and the closest thing I had to a best friend in this godforsaken city. Ryan, you awake? Unfortunately. What's up? I'm at Murphy's bar. You need to get down here. Something in his voice made me sit up straighter. Paul wasn't the dramatic type. Why? What's going on? Just trust me, man. You need to hear this yourself. 20 minutes later, I was walking into Murphy's, a dive bar that smelled like stale beer and broken dreams. Paul was sitting in a corner booth, nursing a whiskey and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. This better be good, I said, sliding into the seat across from him. I could lose my job for leaving my post. Order a drink first. Paul, trust me, you're going to need it. I flagged down the bartender and ordered a beer. When it arrived, Paul leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Lisa and Barb were here earlier. They didn't see me, but I heard every word. My stomach dropped. And? They were talking about Megan, about her and some guy named Travis. The beer suddenly tasted like sawdust. What kind of talking? Paul's expression was grim. The detailed kind. The kind where they're laughing about how she's been sneaking around for months. How this Travis guy is a real man, unlike her husband who sits in a truck all night playing security guard. Each word hit like a physical blow. I'd known somewhere deep down, but hearing it confirmed felt like being shot all over again. The same hollow, burning sensation I'd felt in Baghdad when shrapnel tore through my shoulder. There's more, Paul continued. They were talking about how Megan brings him to your house, how she's been telling everyone that you're too stupid to figure it out. I drained half my beer in one gulp. Who's Travis? Travis Dalton, owns Dalton Contracting, big guy, drives a lifted truck, thinks he's God's gift to married women. I knew the name. His company had been working on several sites around town. Cocky bastard with a reputation for cutting corners and overcharging clients. How long? I asked. From what I could gather. At least 6 months, maybe longer. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Of Megan coming home and kissing my cheek while she'd been with another man. Half a year of me wondering what I'd done wrong, how I could fix our marriage. There's something else, Paul said quietly. They mentioned Sophie. What about Sophie? Apparently she walked in on them once. Megan told her to keep quiet, said it would destroy the family if you found out. I gripped my beer bottle so hard I was surprised it didn't shatter. My 15-year-old daughter had been carrying this secret, protecting her mother's affair while watching her father stumble around in ignorance. I'm sorry, man, Paul said. I know this isn't how you wanted to find out. I finished my beer and stood up. Thanks for telling me. What are you going to do? That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? What does a man do when he discovers his wife has been cheating on him for months, humiliating him in front of the entire town, and forcing his daughter to keep her dirty secrets? I don't know yet, I said, but I'm going to figure it out. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and racing thoughts. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Megan. Not yet. First, I needed proof. Real, undeniable evidence that would leave no room for lies or manipulation. The house was dark except for the porch light. Megan's car was in the garage, which meant she'd made it home from her late shift at some point. I let myself in quietly and checked on Sophie. She was asleep, her face peaceful in the dim light from the hallway. How many nights had she lain awake, carrying the weight of her mother's betrayal? I went to the kitchen and poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon. The good stuff, the bottle we'd been saving for special occasions. Well, finding out your wife is a cheating liar seemed pretty special. Megan appeared in the doorway, wearing the silk nightgown I'd bought her for Christmas. She looked beautiful, as always. It made everything worse. "You're home late," she said, padding over to the refrigerator. "Work ran long. How was your shift?" "Exhausting. We had 3 emergency surgeries." The lie rolled off her tongue like she'd been practicing. "I barely had time to grab dinner." I nodded, taking another sip of bourbon. "That's rough." She moved behind me, her hands settling on my shoulders. Once, that touch would have sent electricity through my body. Now it felt like a betrayal. "You seem tense," she said, her fingers working at the knots in my neck. "Just tired." "Maybe we could." Her voice dropped to that husky whisper she used when she wanted something. I stood up, stepping away from her touch. "I need to shower." Confusion flickered across her face. "Ryan, is everything okay?" I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I'd married, the mother of my child, the person I'd trusted with my heart and my future. How long had she been planning this? How many times had she and Travis laughed about the stupid husband who never suspected a thing? "Everything's fine," I said. "Just tired." But as I headed upstairs, I knew nothing would ever be fine again. 3 days of playing the oblivious husband had nearly driven me insane. I'd watched Megan lie to my face about working late, listened to her make plans for another girls' night, and pretended not to notice how she'd started taking her phone into the bathroom with her. But I'd also been busy. Paul had connections throughout the city, and I'd called in every favor I could think of. By Wednesday evening, I had Travis Dalton's address, his work schedule, and a pretty good idea of when he and Megan were meeting. I was parked outside his house, a sprawling ranch on the expensive side of town, when my phone rang. Detective Carla Mendez. "Mr. Hale? This is Detective Mendez with the city police. I need you to come down to the station." "What's this about?" "It's about your daughter, sir. She's here with me, and she's pretty shaken up. You need to get down here now." The drive to the police station was the longest 10 minutes of my life. 1,000 scenarios raced through my mind, each worse than the last. By the time I burst through the doors of the precinct, I was ready to tear apart anyone who'd hurt my daughter. Detective Mendez was waiting for me in the lobby. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked tired, like she'd seen too much of humanity's dark side. "Mr. Hale, I'm Detective Mendez. Sophie's fine, but we need to talk." She led me to a small conference room where Sophie sat hunched over a cup of hot chocolate. When she saw me, she jumped up and threw her arms around my waist. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I held her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "It's okay, sweetheart. Whatever happened, it's okay." Detective Mendez closed the door behind us. "Sophie, why don't you tell your father what happened?" My daughter pulled away from me, wiping her eyes. "I went home early from school. I had a headache, and the nurse said I could leave. When I got there, she was with someone." My jaw clenched. "Travis." Sophie's eyes widened. "You know? I found out a few days ago." "What happened, honey?" "They were in the living room, and they were... I tried to go upstairs without them seeing me, but I dropped my backpack. Mom freaked out, started yelling about how I was supposed to be in school, and then Travis..." She shuddered. "What did he do?" My voice came out as a growl. "He grabbed my arm. Hard. He said if I told anyone what I saw, he'd make sure you lost your job. He said he had connections, that he could make our whole family disappear." The room went red around the edges. I'd eliminated men in Iraq for less than threatening my family. Detective Mendez cleared her throat. "Sophie called us from a neighbor's house. She was scared to go home and didn't know where else to turn." I knelt down in front of my daughter, taking her hands in mine. You did the right thing, Sophie. You should never have to carry secrets like this. I wanted to tell you, she whispered, but Mom said it would destroy our family. She made me promise. Your mother was wrong. This isn't your fault, and it's not your responsibility to protect her lies. Detective Mendez leaned back in her chair. Mr. Hale, I have to ask, did you know about your wife's relationship with Mr. Dalton? I found out 3 days ago. And you didn't confront them? I looked at Sophie, then back at the detective. I was gathering evidence. I wanted to be sure before I did anything. Well, now you're sure. Mendez's voice was flat, professional. The question is, what are you going to do about it? It was a loaded question, and we both knew it. A cop asking a betrayed husband what he planned to do about the man who'd threatened his daughter. In a movie, this would be where the hero grabbed a gun and went looking for revenge. But this wasn't a movie, and I wasn't a movie hero. I was a father who needed to protect his daughter and a husband who'd been made a fool of in front of the entire town. I'm going to handle it, I said finally. Mendez nodded slowly. Sophie, would you mind waiting outside for a few minutes? I need to speak with your father privately. After Sophie left, Mendez leaned forward. Off the record? Off the record. Travis Dalton is a piece of garbage. He's been skating by on Daddy's money and political connections for years. We've had complaints about him before, but nothing ever sticks. What kind of complaints? The kind where married women suddenly develop black eyes and their husbands get mysterious job troubles. She paused. I can't prove any of it, but I know what I know. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Are you saying he's hit Megan? I'm saying Travis Dalton has a pattern of behavior, and that pattern includes intimidation, manipulation, and violence. What he did to Sophie today, that's just Tuesday for him. We stared at each other across the table. Finally, Mendez spoke again. I've been a cop for 20 years, Mr. Hale. I've seen what happens when good men get pushed too far. Sometimes the system works, sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't? She stood up, straightening her jacket. When it doesn't, sometimes good men have to handle things themselves. Hypothetically speaking, of course. Of course. Hypothetically, if someone were to teach Mr. Dalton a lesson about threatening children, and if that lesson were delivered in a way that didn't technically break any laws, she shrugged. Well, I'd probably be too busy with paperwork to investigate thoroughly. The message was clear. Travis Dalton had finally messed with the wrong family, and Detective Mendez wasn't going to lose any sleep if he faced some consequences. I appreciate the hypothetical advice, I said. Don't mention it, hypothetically or otherwise. I collected Sophie and drove her to Paul's house. His wife, Maria, fussed over her like a mother hen, making sandwiches and hot chocolate while Paul and I talked in the garage. So, what's the plan? He asked. I'm going to destroy him. Define destroy. I'd been thinking about it during the drive over. Travis Dalton thought he was untouchable, that his money and connections made him bulletproof. He'd threatened my daughter and humiliated my family, but he'd also made a crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me. He's a contractor, right? His reputation is everything. Clients need to trust him with their homes, their businesses. Paul nodded. Go on. What happens when word gets out that he's been sleeping with married women? That he threatens children? That he's not the upstanding businessman he pretends to be? His business tanks. Exactly. And what happens to a man like Travis when he loses his money and his status? Paul grinned. He falls apart. I'm going to take everything from him, Paul. His business, his reputation, his sense of security. When I'm done, he'll wish he'd never heard the name Hale. What about Megan? That was the harder question. Megan was Sophie's mother, and despite everything, I'd loved her for 16 years. But she'd made her choice. She'd chosen Travis over our family, lies over truth, and she'd dragged our daughter into her web of deception. Megan made her bed, I said finally. Now she gets to lie in it, alone. Paul clapped me on the shoulder. Whatever you need, brother. I've got your back. As I drove home that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Purpose. For too long, I'd been drifting, letting life happen to me instead of taking control. But that was over now. Travis Dalton had threatened my daughter and destroyed my marriage. Now he was going to learn what happened when you messed with a man who had nothing left to lose. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I had more important things to do than watch empty construction sites. Megan was already gone when I woke up, off to another early shift at the hospital. She'd left a note saying she'd be working late again. The routine was so predictable it was almost insulting. I dropped Sophie off at school, making sure she had Paul's number programmed into her phone. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you call him immediately. Don't go home, don't try to handle it yourself. Understand?" She nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. "Dad, you're not going to do anything stupid, are you?" "Define stupid." "You know what I mean?" I kissed her forehead. "I'm going to fix this, Sophie. Your mother and Travis think they can treat our family like garbage, but they're wrong. I promise you, this ends today." After dropping her off, I drove to Dalton Contracting. It was a modest office building with a yard full of equipment and materials. Travis's lifted Ford F-250 was parked in the front spot, gleaming black paint and chrome bumpers screaming compensation issues. I parked across the street and waited. Paul had done some digging and discovered that Travis usually left the office around 10 for his first job site visit of the day. Sure enough, at 9:58, he emerged from the building. Travis Dalton was everything I'd expected. Tall, muscular, with the kind of artificial tan that came from a salon. He wore expensive work boots and jeans that had probably never seen actual work. His swagger suggested a man who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. That was about to change. I followed him to a residential job site on the north side of town. He parked his truck and went inside to talk to the homeowners, leaving his pride and joy unattended in the driveway. It took me less than 5 minutes to slash all 4 tires and pour a bag of concrete mix into his gas tank. For good measure, I used a key to scratch Child Threatener into the paint on both sides of the truck. Then I waited. Travis emerged from the house 20 minutes later, laughing at something the homeowner had said. The laughter died when he saw his truck. "What the hell?" He circled the vehicle, his face growing redder with each step. When he saw the scratched message, he let out a roar of rage that could probably be heard 3 blocks away. I stepped out from behind a nearby van. "Problem, Travis?" He spun around, his hands clenched into fists. Up close, he was even bigger than I'd expected. Probably 6'3" and 220. But size didn't mean much when you'd never been in a real fight. "You son of a jerk! You did this!" "Did what? I'm just a concerned citizen who happened to be walking by. You're that security guard, Megan's husband. Ryan Hale. Nice to finally meet you." He took a step toward me, trying to use his size to intimidate. "You have no idea who you're messing with." "Sure I do. You're the coward who threatens 15-year-old girls when he gets caught with his pants down. That little brat should have minded her own business." The words were barely out of his mouth before I moved. 3 years of Army combatives training and 15 years of staying in shape paid off as I closed the distance between us in a heartbeat. My first punch caught him in the solar plexus, doubling him over. The second was an uppercut that snapped his head back and sent him stumbling into his ruined truck. "That little brat is my daughter," I said, advancing on him. "And if you ever threaten her again, they'll never find your body." Travis tried to swing at me, but he was off balance and panicked. I ducked easily and drove my knee into his ribs, hearing the satisfying whoosh of air leaving his lungs. He went down hard, landing on his back in the gravel driveway. I stood over him, my boot pressing lightly against his throat. "Here's how this is going to work," I said conversationally. "You're going to stay away from my wife and my daughter. You're going to find a new hobby that doesn't involve destroying families. And if I ever see you within 100 yards of my house, I'll finish what we started here." You can't do this?" "I just did. And unless you want the whole town to know that a security guard beat the hell out of the big tough contractor, you'll keep your mouth shut about it." I lifted my boot and stepped back. Travis rolled over. "This isn't over," he wheezed. "Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet." I walked back to my truck, leaving him lying in the driveway next to his destroyed vehicle. The homeowners had come outside to see what the commotion was about, and I could hear Travis trying to explain what had happened without admitting he'd been beaten up by a man 6 inches shorter than him. Phase 1 was complete, but I was just getting started. That afternoon, I paid a visit to Murphy's bar. It was early enough that the lunch crowd was still there, including several of Travis's construction buddies and a few of the town gossips, who treated the place like their personal information exchange. I ordered a beer and waited. Sure enough, within an hour, the story of Travis's truck had made its way through the rumor mill. The details got more elaborate with each telling, but the core message remained the same. Someone had finally stood up to Travis Dalton. "Heard someone gave Travis a taste of his own medicine," said Jim Kowalski, a plumber who'd worked on several of Travis's jobs. "About time," replied another voice. "That guy's been asking for it for years." I nursed my beer and listened as the conversation turned to Travis's business practices, his treatment of subcontractors, and his reputation with married women. By the time I left, half the bar was sharing stories about Travis's various misdeeds. Word travels fast in a small city, and I was counting on it. That evening, I was waiting in my driveway when Megan got home from her late shift. She pulled into the garage and sat in her car for several minutes, probably texting Travis about their next rendezvous. When she finally came inside, she looked nervous. "How was work?" I asked from the kitchen table. "Fine, busy." She set down her purse and looked around. "Where's Sophie?" "At Paul's. She's spending the night there." "Why?" I stood up and walked over to her. For a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married, vulnerable and uncertain. Then I remembered my daughter's tear-stained face in the police station. "Because I know about Travis." The color drained from her face. "Ryan, I know about the affair. I know about the lies. And I know what he did to Sophie yesterday." She tried to speak, but I held up a hand. "I'm not interested in explanations or apologies. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." "What does that mean?" I walked past her toward the stairs. "It means you need to decide what's more important to you, your family or your boyfriend. Because you can't have both." "Ryan, please, we can work this out." I stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked back at her. "No, Megan, we can't. You involved our daughter in your lies. You brought him into our house, into our bed, and when Sophie caught you, instead of ending it, you made her keep your secret." Tears were streaming down her face now. "I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen, and now you get to live with the consequences." I went upstairs and packed a bag. When I came back down, Megan was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her hands. "Where are you going?" she asked without looking up. "Paul's. I'll be back tomorrow to get the rest of my things." "And then what?" "Then you decide, him or us. But you don't get to have both anymore." I was almost to the door when she spoke again. "He's not going to leave his wife for me, is he?" I turned around. She looked small and broken, nothing like the confident woman who'd been sneaking around behind my back for months. "No, Megan, he's not. Men like Travis don't leave their wives. They just collect mistresses until they get bored or caught. I've been so stupid." "Yes, you have. The question is whether you're going to keep being stupid or if you're going to try to salvage what's left of your family." But as I walked out the door, I already knew her answer. Megan had chosen her path months ago. Now she would have to walk it alone. The next morning brought the first real consequences of my war against Travis Dalton. Paul woke me up with a cup of coffee and a grin that could have lit up a stadium. "You need to see this," he said, handing me his tablet. The local Facebook community page was buzzing with activity. Someone had posted a photo of Travis's vandalized truck, and the comments section had exploded into a full-scale discussion of his business practices and personal life. Sarah Mitchell says he overcharged her by $3,000 for a bathroom renovation, Paul read over my shoulder. Jennifer Walsh claims he made inappropriate comments about her marriage while working on her kitchen. And look at this one from Mike Chen. Travis Dalton propositioned my wife while I was deployed overseas. I scrolled through dozens of similar comments. It was like opening a floodgate. Once people felt safe to speak up, they couldn't stop sharing their Travis Dalton horror stories. "This is better than I hoped," I said. "It gets better. Check the business review sites." Paul pulled up Yelp, Google Reviews, and Angie's List. Travis's ratings had plummeted overnight as people who'd previously kept quiet about bad experiences suddenly found their voices. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We need to talk." "T?" I showed it to Paul. "He wants to meet. You going to do it?" "Absolutely." We arranged to meet at a diner on the outskirts of town. I arrived first and chose a booth in the back corner where we could talk without being overheard. Travis showed up 15 minutes later, looking like he'd slept in his clothes. His face was bruised from our encounter the day before, and he walked with a slight limp. More importantly, his usual swagger was gone, replaced by the nervous energy of a man whose world was crumbling. "You son of a jerk," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Enlighten me." "I've lost 3 contracts since yesterday. 3. My phone hasn't stopped ringing with people canceling jobs." "That's terrible. You should probably find a new line of work." His hands clenched into fists on the table. "This is about Megan, isn't it? You're jealous because she chose a real man over some washed-up security guard." I leaned back in my seat, studying his face. "Is that what you think this is about? Jealousy? What else? This is about you threatening my daughter. The affair is between me and Megan, but the moment you put your hands on Sophie, you made it personal." "I barely touched her." "You grabbed a 15-year-old girl and threatened to destroy her family. In my book, that makes you a predator." The word hit him like a physical blow. "I'm not a predator." "Really? Because from where I'm sitting, you look like a man who uses his size and connections to intimidate women and children. What do you think the people reading those Facebook comments are going to conclude?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he looked up, there was something desperate in his eyes. What do you want?" "I want you to stay away from my family. All of them. Megan, Sophie, me. I want you to find a new hobby that doesn't involve destroying marriages." "And if I do that, you'll call off your dogs?" I shook my head. "Travis, you're not listening. I didn't post those comments or write those reviews. I didn't make people hate you. All I did was give them permission to tell the truth." "That's bullshit." "Is it? Tell me, how many of those stories are lies? How many of those women are making up their complaints about your behavior?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "That's what I thought. You've been coasting on Daddy's connections and your own intimidation tactics for years. Well, congratulations. You finally picked on the wrong family." I stood up to leave, but he grabbed my wrist. "Please, I'll lose everything." "You should have thought about that before you threatened my daughter." I pulled free and walked away, leaving him sitting alone in the booth. As I reached the door, I heard him call out, "This isn't over." I turned back. "Yes, Travis, it is." But I was wrong. It wasn't over. It was just getting started. That afternoon, Detective Mendez called me at Paul's house. "We need to talk," she said. "Can you come down to the station?" "Am I in trouble?" "Not the kind you're thinking of. Just get down here." I found her in the same conference room where I'd talked to Sophie 2 days earlier. She looked tired, like she'd been working too many double shifts. "Travis Dalton filed a complaint against you," she said without preamble. "What kind of complaint?" "Harassment, vandalism, assault. He's claiming you attacked him unprovoked and destroyed his property." I leaned back in my chair. "And what do you think about his claims?" "I think Travis Dalton is a liar who's finally facing consequences for his actions." She paused. "But I also think you need to be careful. He's got connections in this town, and some of them might be willing to help him out of spite." "What kind of connections?" "The kind that could make your life very difficult if they wanted to. His father-in-law sits on the city council. His brother-in-law is a prosecutor in the county attorney's office. These aren't people you want as enemies." I felt a chill run down my spine. I'd been so focused on destroying Travis that I hadn't considered the possibility of collateral damage. "Are you telling me to back off?" "I'm telling you to be smart. Travis is wounded and desperate, which makes him dangerous. Men like him don't go down quietly." As if to prove her point, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my supervisor at the security company. "Ryan, this is Dave. I need you to come in. We've had some complaints about your performance, and corporate wants to discuss your future with the company." I hung up and looked at Detective Mendez. That was fast. Like I said, he's got connections. "So what do you suggest?" She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Hypothetically, if someone wanted to finish what they started with Travis Dalton, they'd need to be very careful about how they did it. They'd need to make sure there was no evidence linking them to whatever happened, and they'd need to make sure that whatever consequences Travis faced appeared to be the natural result of his own actions. Hypothetically. Hypothetically. I left the police station with a lot to think about. Travis had escalated the conflict by trying to get me fired, which meant the gloves were officially off. But Detective Mendez was right. I needed to be smarter about how I handled this. That evening, I had dinner with Sophie at Paul's house. She seemed more relaxed than she'd been in weeks, but I could see the worry in her eyes. "Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd been so focused on my war with Travis that I hadn't fully considered what this would mean for Sophie. "I don't know, sweetheart. That depends on your mother." "She's been calling me all day, crying. She says she made a mistake and wants to fix things." "What do you think about that?" Sophie was quiet for a long moment, pushing food around on her plate. "I think she should have thought about that before she brought him to our house, before she made me lie for her." The pain in her voice broke my heart. Megan's affair hadn't just destroyed our marriage, it had shattered our daughter's trust in the one person who was supposed to protect her above all else. "I'm sorry you had to go through this," I said. "It's not your fault, Dad. You're the only one who's been honest with me." Later that night, after Sophie had gone to bed, Paul and I sat on his back porch drinking beer and planning my next move. "So, Travis got you fired," he said. "Suspended pending investigation. But yeah, probably fired. And he filed a police complaint. Which won't go anywhere, according to Detective Mendez. So what's next?" I took a long drink of beer, staring up at the stars. Next, I show Travis Dalton what happens when you mess with a man who has nothing left to lose. I'm listening. His business is already taking a hit from the social media backlash, but that's not enough. I want him completely destroyed, financially, professionally, personally. How? I smiled grimly. By giving the people of this town exactly what they want: justice. The plan I hatched over the next 3 days was elegant in its simplicity. Travis Dalton had built his reputation on being the tough guy who always got his way. I was going to use that reputation to destroy him. It started with a phone call to the local newspaper. The reporter, a young woman named Jessica Chen, had been covering city politics and business news for about 2 years. She was hungry for a story that would make her career. I have information about systematic fraud and intimidation in the local construction industry, I told her. Are you interested? We met at a coffee shop downtown. I brought copies of everything Paul had helped me gather. Building permits that didn't match completed work, complaints filed with the Better Business Bureau that had mysteriously disappeared, and testimonials from a dozen people who'd been cheated or intimidated by Travis Dalton. This is incredible, Jessica said, flipping through the documents. How did you get all this? Let's just say I have a personal interest in seeing justice done. You're Megan Hale's husband, aren't you? The one whose daughter was threatened? I didn't answer directly. Are you going to run the story or not? I need to verify some of these claims, but yes, this is front-page material. The article ran 3 days later under the headline, Local Contractor Accused of Fraud, Intimidation. It was devastating, laying out a pattern of behavior that painted Travis as a predator who used his family connections to escape consequences for his actions. But the newspaper story was just the opening move. That same morning, I drove to the job site where Travis was supposed to be working on a commercial renovation. His crew was there, but Travis was nowhere to be seen. I talked to the foreman, a guy named Rick who'd worked construction for 20 years. Haven't seen him since yesterday, Rick said. Word is he's holed up at home, scared to show his face. What about the job? Client's threatening to sue if we don't finish on schedule, but half the crew quit after that newspaper story came out. Nobody wants to be associated with him anymore. I drove to Travis's house, a McMansion in an upscale subdivision. His wife's car was in the driveway, but his truck was nowhere to be seen. I parked across the street and waited. 20 minutes later, Travis emerged from the house carrying a suitcase. He threw it into the back of a rental car and drove off without looking back, running away just like I'd hoped. My phone buzzed, a text from Megan. Can we talk, please? I drove to our house. My house, really, since my name was the only one on the mortgage. Megan was waiting in the kitchen, looking like she'd aged 10 years in the past week. He's gone, she said without preamble. I know. He left town this morning, didn't even say goodbye. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down across from her. What did you expect? Men like Travis don't stick around when things get difficult. I've been so stupid. Yes, you have. She flinched at my bluntness, but I was past the point of caring about her feelings. I want to fix this, she said. I want to save our marriage. It's too late for that. Ryan, please. I made a mistake, but we can work through this. We have 16 years together. We have Sophie. You involved Sophie in your lies. You made our daughter complicit in your betrayal. That's not a mistake, Megan. That's a choice. Tears were streaming down her face now. I know I screwed up, but I love you. I love our family. No, you don't. If you loved our family, you wouldn't have risked it for a fling with a married contractor. It wasn't just a fling. I thought he cared about me. He was using you, just like he used every other woman he cheated with. The only difference is that you were stupid enough to think you were special. She sobbed harder, her shoulders shaking. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old sympathy, the urge to comfort her that had been my default for 16 years. But then I thought about Sophie's face in the police station, and the feeling passed. I've already talked to a lawyer, I said. I'm filing for divorce. What about Sophie? Sophie will live with me. You can have supervised visitation until you prove you're capable of putting her needs before your own desires. You can't take my daughter away from me. I'm not taking her away. You gave her away the moment you decided your affair was more important than her well-being. I stood up to leave, but Megan grabbed my arm. Please, Ryan. I'll do anything. I'll go to counseling. I'll quit my job. I'll do whatever you want. I looked down at her, this woman I'd once loved more than life itself, and felt nothing but pity. What I want is for you to have thought about the consequences before you destroyed our family. But since that's impossible, what I want now is for you to sign the divorce papers without a fight, and let Sophie and me rebuild our lives without you. I won't sign them. Then we'll do this the hard way. But either way, we're done. I walked out of the house and didn't look back. 2 weeks later, the Travis Dalton story reached its inevitable conclusion. The newspaper investigation had triggered a city audit of his business practices, which led to criminal charges for fraud and tax evasion. His wife filed for divorce and took half of everything he hadn't already lost to lawsuits. But the real justice came from an unexpected source. I was having lunch with Sophie at a downtown restaurant when Detective Mendez approached our table. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. "Of course." She sat down and ordered a coffee. "Thought you'd like to know that Travis Dalton was arrested in Phoenix yesterday." "What for?" "Assault. Apparently he tried to start a new life in Arizona, but his reputation followed him. When a potential client confronted him about the newspaper article, Travis lost his temper and put the guy in the hospital." Sophie looked up from her sandwich. "Good." Detective Mendez smiled. The victim was a retired Marine. Travis picked the wrong guy to mess with. "How long will he get?" "With his record and the severity of the assault. Probably 5 to 7 years." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized was there. Travis Dalton was finally going to face real consequences for his actions. "There's something else," Detective Mendez continued. "The investigation into his business practices uncovered some interesting connections. Turns out his father-in-law and brother-in-law were helping him cover up complaints and avoid inspections. They're both facing charges of their own." "Corruption?" "Among other things. The whole family's going down." After Detective Mendez left, Sophie and I finished our lunch in comfortable silence. Finally, she spoke. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "I'm proud of you." "Why?" "Because you didn't let them get away with it. Because you fought for our family, even when Mom wouldn't." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You're the only family I need, kiddo." 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Megan had eventually signed the papers after her lawyer explained that fighting would only make things worse for her. She got supervised visitation with Sophie every other weekend, but Sophie rarely wanted to see her. I found a new job with a private investigation firm, using the skills I'd developed during my war with Travis to help other people solve their problems. It paid better than security work and gave me a sense of purpose I'd been missing. Megan moved to an apartment across town and tried to rebuild her life, but the damage was done. Her affair had become public knowledge, and in a small city like ours, that kind of reputation was hard to shake. She eventually took a job at a hospital 2 hours away and started over completely. As for Travis, he was serving his sentence in an Arizona state prison. I heard through Paul that he'd been attacked by other inmates who didn't appreciate men who threatened children. Apparently, even criminals had standards. The whole experience had taught me something important about justice. Sometimes the system works, and sometimes it doesn't, but when it doesn't, sometimes good people have to take matters into their own hands. I'd started this fight to protect my daughter and restore my family's honor. I'd ended it by destroying a predator who'd spent years hurting innocent people. Travis Dalton had thought he was untouchable, that his connections and intimidation tactics made him bulletproof. He'd been wrong, and now he was paying the price for every person he'd ever hurt, every family he'd ever destroyed, every child he'd ever threatened. Justice had finally been served.